Welcome back. 7 Hours in Osan, Part 3. In our previous two parts, we examined issues that hampered the U.S. 8th Army, 24th Infantry Division, and the 1st Battalion, 21st Infantry Regiment prior to the onset of the Korean War in 1949 and 1950. In our second session, we analyzed issues that Task Force Smith encountered in the early days of their deployment on the Korean Peninsula. In our last part, we will analyze the significance that Task Force Smith holds as we move forward in U.S. military history. First of all, Task Force Smith is not remembered as a significant battle. The Battle of the Bulge, in World War II, the Battle of Osan, in Vietnam War. We do not fondly remember the Battle of Osan or Task Force Smith. Many times we look at that, we analyze it, it still remains relevant 68 years later because it stands as a cautionary tale. At the end of World War II, the United States military transitioned from a combat service to an occupational army. The failure of leaders during this post-war period to maintain a high level of rigor and intensity in their training led to soldiers that were vastly unprepared for war only 5 years after winning World War II. Task Force Smith should not be viewed as failure as much as the dangers of letting a highly trained army go unprepared. In the case of Task Force Smith, many of the junior soldiers relied on past greatness in order to carry them through. But past greatness does not sustain the readiness of today's army. Now, what was the impossible scenario facing Task Force Smith? Lieutenant Colonel Smith had too few men. He had 540 soldiers on the ground when combat operations began in July of 1950. These men had too little training. Basic combat training prior to 1950 was not what it looks like today. General Walker, when he came in and took the position of commanding general of the 8th U.S. Army, made it his mission to change the focus of the soldiers to that of training. He didn't fail, he just ran out of time. Soldiers in Task Force Smith had too few supplies. They did not have the right supplies. They had too little ammunition and not enough ammunition. Task Force Smith, with its Alpha Battery 52nd Artillery Battalion, had only 13 high explosive anti-tank rounds available to them, and they quickly extinguished them, knocking out 2 tanks. However, majority of the tanks went right on by. If you add up those too few, too littles, we get units that are grossly unprepared for war. Their mission: 540 soldiers sent to slow down the advancing North Korean army long enough for more units to get onto the peninsula. All in all, Task Force Smith was not a failure. Task Force Smith brought out a lot of heroism. It brought out a lot of it pointed out a lot of the fallacies that the U.S. Army had about itself in 1950. In the final count, Task Force Smith delayed the North Korean Army for 7 hours. Why is this significant? Every hour was critical when the U.S. military had to get units to the Korean Peninsula. They had to prevent the North Korean army from taking the capital of Seoul, and more importantly, the port of Busan, which was the only port large enough to offload large amounts of military equipment quickly. Was it a failure? No. It did bring to light the need for change and a cautionary tale for future soldiers to be wary of. Thank you for evaluating my briefing. If there's any questions, I'll take them at this time. Thank you.